Discourse Now, he's Paul Ogden.
And that's Mark Small. And we have some guests today, and I think we should get our websites again.
Yes. Our guests are Libertarian Party candidate for Governor of the State of Indiana, Rupert Boneham.
Yes.
And Libertarian Party candidate for Lieutenant Governor, State of Indiana, Brad Klopfenstein.
He's running for President of the State Senate.
Yeah, running for President of the State Senate.
That's what he's running for.
That's
exactly right.
Yeah.
Sounds more prestigious.
What's your contact information?
RupertForGovernor.com. Please check that out.
Is it FOR or the number?
FOR, yes. You spell it all out.
All right.
Spell it out.
And it's Rupert with one P.
RUPERT. Yes. FOR. Yeah.
Let's go back to what we were talking about just a minute ago. Pick up where we were.
Okay, good. Okay, good. With the detention centers, getting back to the detention center and privatization of the detention center really should never happen. We should look at closing some of the detention centers down because we're lessening the population. We're not encouraging more career criminals. We're encouraging less because we divert them off into the probation where we teach them how to make that legal living. Put them in not a forced work program, but an encouraged program that if you do not attend your drug and alcohol classes, your work classes, your education classes, then you go to prison. There's giving them that ability.
There's a study that just came out a couple of months ago that indicated that college education for incarcerated individuals in prison, in penitentiaries, reduces recidivism rate by like 50%.
And in our states, a lot of our colleges, you can't take your classes unless you're sentenced to extended periods of time because they do not see the value in that. They don't want to. I'm talking about as soon as we get our hands on some of these young men and women, we start redirecting their lives and showing them legal livings.
Well, Article 1, Section 19 of the Constitution of the State of Indiana states that our penal code should be based on principles of reformation and not vindictive justice.
Exactly right. The punishment should match the crime. I can't remember exactly. I don't have it marked, but I've got the Constitution well enough in my head that I know.
And now I have a copy.
The punishment should match the crime, and a lifetime of punishment does not match some of the crimes that these young men and women are doing. Giving them that ability to re-enter into society after they've paid their debt and paying their debt something that helps us all.
Let's go to what you were wanting to talk about in terms of the Constitution.
Okay, being able to stand up to the Constitution, being able to show that the government really should be, providing that simple government, running our cities, keeping our roads and bridges safe and maintained, educating our children and keeping out of our lives, not being our moral compass, our moral judge, not putting compliance regulations in front of us, not stepping all over our constitutional rights.
But when the framers were sitting down, and it's a very that document is very...
Oh, you're talking two constitutions.
I'm talking about the federal constitution now.
Right, okay.
Yeah. When the framers sat down, on the one hand, they had just gone through a war for liberty and people being equal. They were all wealthy white male landowners. 20% or 20 of the 53 claim to own human beings as chattel. So there's it's kind of a schizophrenic document in some ways, but at the same time it's grown over time to guarantee and protect people's liberty interests. They saw at the time this huge country spread out in front of them, and they saw the federal government as being necessary to place controls on the individual states for purposes of commerce. Because otherwise, I think it was New York especially was notorious for jacking taxes on commerce. It was going states inland because they had the main port. So the role of the federal government has changed somewhat, but then in the Civil War, there was a vision of we needed strong central authority because of the way in which the country had changed. Isn't there a transformation over time from those basic values?
Oh, of course. That's why we talk about a living document that is changing.
Oh, you're very smug.
But
we have
we want to make sure also that in our Constitution we try and refer back to it at every chance we get with the legislation that we're passing. And that's what I want to do in Indiana is stand up and make sure we stay to the Constitution and we keep focused on giving our rights back to us that have been taken over time.
I know the Libertarian Party, or you came out with a press release on the Affordable Care Act, otherwise referred to as Obamacare.
Well,
and this follows a position by John Gregg and a position by Mike Pence, Democrat, Republican candidate for governor, and you you were trying to set them straight, correct?
Well, we stood up and said, you can't depend on it being repealed. You can't sit back and do nothing. You better, if nothing else, I've learned over 20 years of dealing with the system in my detention center programs that programs are going to be handed down to you, and until you get other word, you deal with it and you run and you figure out how to keep some control for yourself while keeping the people that are forcing you to do this somewhat responsible to pay for the darn thing. And that's what we're talking about, is a hybrid plan, not trying to take it all on our own, which I would love to stand up and say, as the state of Indiana, we can stand up on our own and take care of anything we have. And we could, but I don't need the federal government, throwing more and more regulations at us that we can't pay for. I want to keep a hybrid plan that the federal government has some responsibility in the enrollment and signing up, registering hundreds of thousands of people at hours apiece, which is millions of dollars and millions of hours of time. But we keep control in the services, providing the care, deeming what is going to be given. So we're not letting the federal government say who can and can't get services.
I have MS. My wife's a cancer survivor.
Right.
Our health insurance was at $2,000 a month between us.
At our program, it'll go to $394, $395 a month.
I was going to say within 3 or 4 days of the Supreme Court affirming the Affordable Care Act, I jumped online and started. I started shopping. We're down under 600 now between us total.
Exactly. Below 600, that's not bad.
Yeah, but I guess my point is, there's so much of that's bloat because they're giving each other $27 million annual bonuses. The executives are. It has nothing to do with providing health care.
And the head of WellPoint recently left and got a $15 million golden parachute. I would love to get $15 million to be fired. I've been fired before, but they never give me money.
I don't want to have the government giving private sector dollars away in our ability to provide health care, but we are forced to go into the private sector. That's why we chose Anthem, and one of the plans that gives the widest range of services at a pretty good mid-range price, like you say. And we will, those of us that are healthy, that do not have any pre-existing conditions, that are already, if I went out and bought it. Now, I am one that does not have health care because I find more value in helping my mentoring program than I do helping myself. This is something that is forcing me into providing health care for my family and myself. I've always taken care of it out of my pocket and always came out of it ahead because I've created those little programs and those plans that it's kind of like my own private insurance.
Switching topics. I don't mean to do this, but we're on time, and every one of these is important.
Okay.
It sounds like it's unusual they're on time.
It is for Mark.
Well, I was looking at election reforms, and you said you wanted to end gerrymandering by going to a nonpartisan commission. Now, what's a nonpartisan commission? Because you know that there are going to be the two parties that have set up the one-party system. Paul and I argue about this sometimes.
Especially locally. We seem to have a one-party system.
Yeah, but it's like they're going to be saying, well, you need to have both parties in it. It's like,
we just watched the redistricting of our electoral bases, and I mean, if you want to take some of this, but showing that we have to bring in more choices, and 3 isn't the answer. 6, 7, 8, bring in more choices.
But what's nonpartisan?
Well, obviously we want everybody to vote, and everybody's going to have an opinion. However, you don't want people that have a vested interest in the process to then be the ones drawing the maps. I think our biggest problem with the maps we have, there's not a lot of right angles out there, or there's far too many, depending on how you want to look at it. But the map should make sense. I actually look back to the Indianapolis redistricting for Marion County back 10 years ago. What the judges did was nice. I mean, you have compact districts. They're all relatively square. That's what we need to be looking at. Right now, and there's a difference. What a lot of people call nonpartisan ends up being bipartisan. And
I know.
And that's rigging the system.
Yes.
Right.
That's rigging the system for the two parties that are already in bed together.
Well, why wouldn't you want to keep it? When you are one of those two parties, why wouldn't you want to keep it just for yourselves and not let any other choices come in?
Yeah,
but I like being that third choice, showing we need to let more than just us in, though.
Shouldn't we have, I mean, we've done some shows on this and had other parties on. Shouldn't we have fourth, fifth, sixth parties? I just call them alternative parties.
Of course.
Or multi-party system.
And one of the things I'm dealing with now, because I represent a candidate on a candidate challenge, independent candidate, he had to go out and get all these signatures.
Right.
And you have the signatures validated by a board of voter registration, which is headed by a Democrat, an appointee of the Democrat and Republican parties locally here.
Right.
They don't have an incentive to let this individual
Well,
on the
we
ballot.
even watched that happen with Jim Wallace trying to get on the ballot, and his signatures, thousands over the necessary.
And they looked at a few signatures and
Right.
threw them out.
Right.
And one of the things that I don't know if it's part of your plan or not, I'd like to see, there's got to be a better way to do that, because now when you go out and try to get people's signatures, try to get their address, try to get their birthday, they don't want to give it anymore.
The first step is for the Libertarians to try and knock that wall down and bring us into a major party also, so we can start passing legislation that opens it up. I don't know if it's going to be dollar reform and some kind of caps do something. Right now in our campaign, we're going up against about $20 million with our 50,000 and growing, our thousands against their millions.
But you're not for public financing of campaigns, are you?
I'm for any way that we can have a debate, a discussion, that we create a situation where we let more choices come in.
Okay. One, what about having voting centers in a county? People don't have to try and figure out where it is they're supposed to vote, and they go to the place where they were supposed to vote last time, and there were people voting there, but they moved it.
One of the reasons why there is that uproar is, we don't keep the same places. We're not using public spaces. We're using churches. We're making people walk into, churches or different places instead of using the fire stations that are supposedly in every neighborhood, creating the community centers and making them so they are everywhere. I talked with the commissioner of the Bureau of Motor Vehicles and said, I want to expand the program so we can create in every social service program the terminal to identify all of our people, give them all state IDs to make it easier for everyone to vote, then create voting places that are steady and regular, that are every time, everywhere. The polling places were set up to be in your neighborhood, and for the neighborhood to know who was coming in the door and to be ran by the neighborhood. We are far away from that.
One thing I want to make sure we get in, you got on there specialty license plates. I've got this whole thing where I don't know why we have specialty license plates. Those license plates are there to be able to identify a motor vehicle.
Why would you want to create a situation that you're taking the ability for a nonprofit organization to make money that does not cost the states any extra funding to create that license plate, but the state generates? It costs less than $1 for the state to produce that license plate.
Because I might disagree.
They collect $15 for that license plate.
But
so it's making money for the state too.
I might disagree with the message that's being carried on there by a specific not-for-profit, and that's kind of, if we're a religious symbol, for example, it says "In God We Trust" on there. If I find that a violation.
That's not a private plate. That's a state plate.
I know that. I think that's wrong.
That is a state plate.
I think that's wrong.
Seriously,
I don't have to look at it.
Why do we even need a license plate on a car other than to generate money for the state?
Oh, to identify somebody pulling away from a robbery. To identify somebody pulling away from a hit and run.
You couldn't recognize that was a red Corolla?
There are a lot of red Corollas. I drive a burgundy Camry. I mean, they're kind of...
I'm just saying...
Having a license plate, we could go to something more like the trucks are going to, with a permanent plate that it's always, you never change it, and it is one plate. But you're talking about two different things, with the state plate forcing you to have "In God We Trust" on our plate, and a private plate that is promoting and generating funds for a nonprofit.
We're running out of time.
Darn it!
Will you guys be on the show again?
Oh, wow, of course.
Yes.
That sounds great.
Of course.
Okay, this is Civil Discourse Now. This is September 1st, 2012. We've been here with Libertarian Party candidate for governor, Rupert Boneham.
Right.
Libertarian Party candidate for Lieutenant Governor, Brad Klopfenstein. I'm Mark Small.
I'm Paul Ogden.
That's Paul Ogden. We'll be back next week.
Oh, yes, and check out RupertForGovernor.com. If you like what you see, hit that donate button.
Thank you.
Take care.